invest in people that are going to do this idea no matter what.
How do you innovate? It's a pretty torturous pursuit.
What were you trying to do with it? Why did you do it in the first place?
It wasn't like a positive vibe, like people weren't like, finally, the opposite. People were not stoked about it at all.
How do you feel about models training on your content?
I don't care.
Yeah, I figured, yeah.
Because it's like a cat out of the bag.
We don't care about our music either. There's just so much I ask because there's so much controversy around music and art. And
that guy Trip Adler, do you know him from Scribd? Pretty successful company, and he's starting something new. And he's like, one of those founders where you're like, normally you'd be like, this is a really successful second-time founder starting something in AI now. And I spoke to him, and he was like, yeah, it's basically like, licensing copyright rights that we find a way to protect and then get people paid. No, and I was just like, this feels...
It's like I'm going to stand in front of a tsunami and I'm going to hold it off.
Yeah, I was like, everything here is hinged on the government protecting IP. And by the way, it's already too late.
I'd compare this phase in AI models training off of copyrighted data is the Napster moment where everything... the record labels couldn't figure out a way to sell music in the digital age. If they had been forward thinking and accepted it, they would have created Spotify and we wouldn't be paying an extra 30% to a DSP. But they didn't, and it had this whole moment where it's you can't really stop this from happening, so just kind of embrace it and figure out how to harness it when it comes out the other side.
One person will get sued, Suno.
These models are going to train on this and they are going to be able to do these things that everyone's feared about them doing, but then we're going to be able to make better art or different art or something.
Is there anything you do fear?
Loaded question that I want to answer correctly. My first instinct is to say no, because I feel specifically us, we're DJs. 15 years ago, the DJ producer, and then still to this day, you've seen the memes about they're just pressing play or all of their music is software. And I remember the whole first wave of that democratization of music software being available and accessible, and the barriers to entry coming down, and all of us being able to make stuff that we weren't able to create before, unless we had access to a crazy studio. And I remember everyone saying that wasn't real music. And here we are 15 years later, where us and all our friends have had massive songs that have been culturally impactful, that play huge shows that tons of people come and have a good time to, and listen to music that make them feel euphoria or sadness or something amazing. It's the still same impact of music has happened, because with a different set of tools. So I'm excited to see what happens next, and I'm excited to use those tools, or for my kids to use those tools, and to see how that enables people's that might not be able to express themselves with this medium.
I mean, I would argue this is the same now. It will be worse in the future, but just lots of slop. It's just a larger volume of stuff that gets made every day. And I think, to Drew's point, the 15 years ago, probably when Jaws, Ableton, and Fruity Loops and all these things came into existence. Now, on Spotify, when we started, there was 10,000 songs uploaded every Friday. Now there's 190,000 or something like that.
That's not that long.
Yeah. And I imagine that in a few years it'll be 1 million, you know what I mean? And that will definitely have an impact about how hard it is to break through, or maybe the importance of having a brand or an identity or standing for something will mean something even more. I just watched this Brian Eno interview with Zane Lowe, and he was just talking about AI and is it scary to him and this? And he was like, no, because it's still the taste at the end of the day. It's still just a tool, for now at least.
Is it maybe the opposite, that actually these tools make people like you that are willing to go the distance and want it the most, and are maybe the most talented, even more advantaged versus everybody else?
Who knows? I can't answer that question yet, and hopefully not, to be honest. I think what we're all going to have to, and not just us who are established, we have our way of making music, and then I think what it does is actually kind of the opposite. Is it just allows more people to be able to make music and perform music and create an experience that other people connect to. I think music is just is my personal favorite form of self-expression. With these tools, I'd assume that more people are going to be able to experience being able to express themselves that way, and that's awesome. And perform it, and you can kind of look at the DJ as like a microcosm blip on the radar of like a version of like more accessibility, what kind of that gets you. But you look at how big the scene is and how fun the scene is now. It's like, how is that a bad thing?
How does it feel the most different now creating a marginal new song versus when you started? Like what is the most felt creative process difference?
I would say that's less technological. It's more my own brain that I'm still trying to like reckon with. Songwriting is you're always trying to scratch this. It's not the same itch, but there is an itch that's like you're trying to satiate. It's deep inside of you that makes you feel something that you haven't felt in other places, or maybe you feel that way because it's you making it that time. But as a massive music fan, I'm trying to like make something that like respects all of the things that have inspired me my entire life. It still makes me feel like, wow, this is my statement now. And you'd think that we'd have a formula now on how to like write a dance song at least, or write a pop song. Forget about trying to write like the truest song for you at that moment, but like it can come from anywhere, and it's so difficult. And I think I would be surprised if any artist told you that they weren't like rewriting their process every single time they go to do an album or a new batch of songs.
Say a little bit more about the nature of those feelings that you're trying to get yourself to feel by making something. I think that's quite a cool.
Well, if I could say it, I wouldn't need to make music.
Yeah.
But it's like it's us tinkering around, and it's really cool having someone that you've made music with your entire life, because what Chainsmokers music is what we both agree on is like fun and tasteful, and we want to play out. But it's not just me or just Alex. It's like a reflection of our friendship and what we've like gotten super stoked on listening to as music fans over the past 20 years.
Is there a song that you remember making together where the creative process behind the song stands out the most in your memory as like emblematic of what it's like to make something together?
I mean, every song I feel like kind of is its own.
You told me about No Shade at Pity one time, and the process behind that, I thought it was so cool.
That's like a day like today.
Yeah, I mean, I probably was like almost like a year to this day, actually. But like that was like an interesting song, especially obviously for me. I'd just gone through like a breakup or something, and we were like pulling a lot of inspiration from that. Just generally speaking, like you kind of go into the studio and you're like, what interesting concepts or things that are happening in our lives can we like talk about or expand on, or just talk about, and then like a lyric or something happens. And we were like thinking about New York City, which is obviously where we started, and just like on a day like this where it's like 75, sunny out, and everyone's just like, winter's over, you know what I mean? And it's time to like be feral and enjoy the city.
60 degrees, but everyone's got their shirts off, and the park pale is
one of the best days of the year.
Yeah, and like all those like bars, fun restaurants with like the sidewalk space are just like overflowing into the streets, and it's like hard to find something that isn't fun or amazing. And so it was kind of like using that as a metaphor for like coming out of a relationship. But then it's like there's so many decisions and things you have to talk about, from like, I mean, how long do we want the verses to be? Is it too wordy? Is the like, do we want to go, is it too dancey? Is it not dancey? Like that feeling of it. I wouldn't say that song was like a runaway success for us by any means, but like I do feel like people keep coming back to it. I feel like we have a lot of songs like that where like I'll get messages throughout the entire year, like once a week someone will be like, dude, this song's really good. And you're like, did you just listen to this? You're my friend. I put this out like 9 months ago. I think that's what's cool about music, is that everyone has these moments with songs, and I have it still with like older songs from like the 60s or 70s or 80s to like new songs that come out last week where you're like, whoa, this dude's preaching. You know what I mean? Or it just resonates deeply in some way that it maybe didn't before, just because of whatever mood or thing you're going through. So I think like with songs like that, it's funny because he's like, we're talking about my breakup, but then we don't want to just make it about my breakup. We want to make something that's like an experience that everyone can kind of relate to. And then he's figuring out what clever ways to like fit this story into, like a visceral scene that like relates to both of us, which is like a New York spring day. And I'm trying to, keep feeding the song with personal sad anecdotes. And
It's a funny process.
yeah, and then, and it's like, and it just kind of goes back and forth in this way with like Emily. I think Emily wrote that song with us too. And so she's, obviously an amazing songwriter. And it's fun, you know what I mean? And then suddenly you're like, there it is. And it's like, I feel like when you make a song like that, you're so excited about it, to play it and to like be like, is this it? Is this gonna resonate, with everybody? But like at the end of the day, like I think whether or not like it met the standard of success for us as on like a metric level, it like hit the mark as far as like a Chainsmokers song on like every level, So I think if you're a fan of our
That's one of my favorite songs of yours, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Then like I think that's a big part of what we've been like re-exploring in the last year is like dialing it back to the Chainsmoker fans and Chainsmoker sound, because I think like similar to going back to the AI stuff, like there's so much so many tools out there right now, so many, so much software, so many ideas, so many genres, so much stuff happening every day that like you almost have to like constrain yourself a little bit to like have success. I forgot who was talking about this, but it's like the guitar has like been the exact same instrument for like hundreds of years, and yet like people are still finding new ways to play it and create sounds and experience, feelings from it. And I feel like, we go into our studio sometimes and it's like, wow, we have, 25 keyboards now. And you're like, it almost like hurts the experience versus helps it sometimes.
If there's no barriers to entry behind, or less and less every day for music creation, what are we left with? And we're left with like, the same way it's like, I could play a guitar the same way and sing a song that, some other guy can, but it might just hit different when that other guy does it or that girl does it, or just because based on their background or the way that they're holding it or the way that they're just voice and flex with those chords. Like there's so much different that comes down to like brand. And like, I hate to say brand when you're talking about art, but like, what is this thing that people like are tuning into you to believe in? And someone brought up the point the other day that like, no artist knows what song they should play at their show. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
No.
I thought that was a really interesting point. And to Alex's, kind of talking about the success or lack thereof of a song like No Shade at Pity. How do you define success in a age of abundance of art? And it's like, especially as like, how do you define success with us where we have a bunch of songs over 1 billion streams, we've had chart-topping songs, but then, what is the one thing that we do that no one else can do? Can that even be replicated by AI? Can that be replicated by another person? Because when that person does it, it will be them doing it, and it will be at a different time, and it'll look different, and it will feel different. And so when you think about AI, like, you can't be scared of it because it's just gonna hit different, for better or for worse at some point. And we just gotta focus on being the most Chainsmokers as possible.
Is art in a really bad place right now generally across the board? Like we have, very few original movies being made. It's like Avengers 25.
Slop everywhere. Like everything's like optimized for various algorithms.
Exactly. But it's like, what does that mean for art in general when it's like anyone can do it and it's accessible? Like, are we in a golden age of creation or is it different? And it's like, we work with artists all the time and they play a song and it's like, oh, this is like a interpolation of a song. And you're like, I have no problem with that stuff. I think it can be really interesting, but you're also like, it's already a hit. So I think when you have an artist like a Fred again or someone come along, you're like, I think it has even bigger impact than maybe in the past because like that originality is so refreshing.
I find him unbelievable. My son and I are huge fans. We've watched like all his various sets. As fellow musicians in a similar category, what is it? Like, how would you describe what he's done effectively to somebody else? Because it feels like the right example of this originality that we kind of all want more of.
Fred's a great example of the same. I mean, there's a lot of the standout artists of the past 3 or 4 years. I mean, if you look at Adochi or Charlie XCX, like most notably probably, Fred, they've all brought you into their world. Like, it's bigger than just music. What's so cool about music right now, and those 3 artists in particular, is they have songs that go like viral, but like it's not traditional pop hits like when we came up, 10 years ago. It's so much cooler now. It's so nuanced and just it's more niche than it was at a time. And like we're seeing this in dance music especially, where it's like the stars of the new stars of dance right now that are doing like blowing out Madison Square Gardens or doing the basically festival-sized crowds for their own shows. If you looked at them on their Spotify monthly listeners, like we were talking about earlier, like, oh, this is an emerging artist. Like this is an opening act, you know? But like, that's what's so cool, and I think kind of wraps up the whole point about if everyone can be creative, it's like, what else can you give them? You need to bring people into something more than just music, you know? And I think that's something we struggle with a lot, where it's like, we're hyper focused on music and like we create this thing, we're like, I crushed it this time. Like this is gonna be it. But like the world building of the whole thing is something that, you know, doesn't come naturally to every artist, which I think will just be more and more important. And as a fan, I want world building, you know? I wanna participate on, I think album is God. I think like, I wanna sit in your world for 45 to an hour and 15 minutes, you know? I wanna put on the costume when I'm listening to something.
I read this amazing post this morning about the need to build heavy things, not light things, like light things being ephemeral, like make it fast, consume it fast, forget it fast. And something like the album approach, or something that takes a long time, that takes a lot of time, heart, effort, blood, sweat, tears, is what we need more of.
Such a good point. I think even like the commonality between like a Fred and a Doechii and a Charlie, like these are people that have been grinding. I know like Doechii's video after she won the Grammys went viral because she was like fired from her job. You know what I mean? And was like, I'm just gonna double down on music, like, you know, or it was some crazy thing. Charlie XS has been writing songs for hit artists for like 15 years. You know what I mean? Just in the background waiting. You know what I mean? Almost like fine-tuning everything, waiting for this moment. And Fred, similarly, is literally a musical savant, but has been writing for Ed Sheeran and huge songwriters in the background. I mean, his story is equally as impressive. And then you have that compared to like the TikTok artists during COVID that like made a viral 15 seconds of a song. And then like labels sign them, and then they're like, what did we just buy? You know what I mean? And they're like, I don't know what this is.
That's all I got.
Totally, and it's not to say that those artists can't break out and do great things. Like Addison Rae, I think, is doing a really great job of building a really amazing career right now.
But that, from what I don't know Addison and haven't worked with her, but everything I hear about, you know, our songwriter friends that are in the studio, that she gets the world building piece of this.
Yeah, you can tell.
What does world building mean? Just like define what that means.
Just defining an aesthetic and a mood and an attitude that you can participate in when you listen to the music. That's how I would see it. Some people do this super thought out, like they'll probably have like boards and plans and branding and, you know, insane creative direction. I think some people are themselves, and their music they just kind of build it inherently.
Like Travis Scott is rage. You know what I mean? Like,
but I would say like Zach Bryan, like as far as like lack of branding goes, but like Zach Bryan is Zach Bryan. Like when you go see a show, when you hear it, and the amount of songs he puts out, the type of videos that he films, I'm just like, this is just a down to earth guy singing. I guess they call it Rust Belt country. Just brilliant songwriting and no frills. You know, you're just getting good ass music. And I feel like Fred Against Me might be the DJ version of that. You know, where it's like, this guy's just making really cool, innovative music and doesn't care how it's packaged.
He's so happy all the time. How is he this happy?
There's this moment in the Boiler Room set that he did where a fan like knocks the cable out and it stops the whole thing. And his reaction to it, he like instantly smiles and is happy about it, and then somehow uses it to like continue, like weaves it into the music somehow. It was like one of these moments where I thought, oh my God. Like
I know the moment you're talking about. It's adorable.
It's amazing.
The guy's so embarrassed that he does it, and his reaction.
And then they start dancing together.
Yeah, it's really nice.
You used the word, this word itch before.
Yeah.
So many of my questions for you guys are like metaphorical for other people building, creating stuff. We both are passionate about people that build companies. We'll talk about that plenty today too. But this getting in touch with the itch, is actually a non-trivial part of making anything great.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear from both of you, like how you originally found yours, like as a source of inspiration for people that like want to find their itch. I think most people don't even ever know what the itch is. Yeah. So like, where did it come from for both of you?
I didn't like grow up wanting to be a musician necessarily. I always had a really close relationship with music, but it was never like a viable career path in my mind. I think like for me, I was always like a very visual, creative type person. I was obsessed with like Nike commercials back in like the 90s and 2000s. I would actually like record them onto like a VHS tape because I was like so inspired by like the feeling you got after you watched them. And like visually, the storytelling and obviously the personas that they had like involved was super cool. I was a huge like NBA fan as a kid. I think most kids are. And I started like, you know, painting a lot when I was younger. And I think it was like trying to like find a language, what is that language that I can speak that like conveys these feelings that I get from, you know, watching these like Nike commercials. As you know, you get older, my dad was an art dealer and he was, you know, fairly successful with it before he passed away. And I think that like when he passed away, it like changed kind of a lot of how I like thought about the world and like what my opportunity was going to be within it. And I kind of like knew on some level it was like an out hustle, out work mentality of things. But like I wouldn't say growing up I looked at the world with like I want to be a musician or I want to be a businessman. I only knew about the art world because that's what was my dad was in it. And so it kind of felt like that, you know, it's like probably like growing up on a farm where you're just like, I'm gonna be a farmer. It's what I know. And then, you know, you go out into the world and experience different things and different opportunities and kind of, I think the itch for me is about like where your like passions lie. Like what do you like actually like spending your time doing and what do you find yourself being drawn to? You know, and I think New York, going to school here was like the perfect place for someone like with my ADHD because you're getting pulled into so many different directions of events and experiences and, you know, the art world. And I think through that, you know, but you also have to like survive here, which is like kind of the, you know, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere sort of mentality. And I always found that like piece super inspiring, but like, I don't know, it's a tough thing because like the itch to me is like, I'd say like it was something that was like far away in the distance that I could like see, but didn't actually have the ability to do anything. And then when we finally, you know, started obviously really building the Chainsmokers and things started to work, it was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? This is the feeling that I've been like seeking out this whole time. And I've just been like applying maximum pressure, kind of grasping at different opportunities. So I think that's why it's like when you meet these young founders, you know, I think having, you know, not necessarily being like, I've always wanted to build this product is great mentality, of course, but it's like someone that's like worldly, I think offers, I don't know, just a more interesting perspective to me about like how they go about being successful in whatever it is they're passionate about. Because, you know, it's not just like a straight line anymore. I think there's so many things that shape a great founder or shape a great company. I think it's more important to have that like paranoia, you know, deep within you that like forces you to like kind of live in fear your whole life or something that like allows you to be, you know, successful. So it's tough for me because the itch was never like, it was just like a survival, you know, thing or like proving people wrong more than like, oh, I just want to, you know, do things. 'Cause I stopped painting when I was like 15 or something, and it was like, wasn't like a sad day for me, you know? It was just kind of like, I'm moving on. I don't have like,
I'm out of paint.
Yeah, I'm out of paint. Like, I just don't really want to do this, you know, anymore. It's more of a mentality thing of how you like search.
But it was a feeling, like you were chasing, there was some vector there that you could.
Totally, it was a feeling of that. There was like, I felt like I was being, you know, like chased also by like people's expectation of what they thought how things were going to end up. Growing up in New York too, you like have a lot of people go on to be, you know, super successful much faster. Sometimes you're like, oh my God, like half my friends have jobs at like great banks now, and I'm like a nightlife promoter, you know, like this sucks. But you know, it's like also like in high school, like, I mean, I wasn't like a loser in high school, but I definitely wasn't like the super popular kid.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, no offense to any of my friends listening that now, you know, it's like, but some of y'all peaked in 9th grade, you know what I mean? And I'm just glad that wasn't me. Yeah.
To tweak the question slightly, because I want to hear the itch answer for you too.
Yeah.
I'm curious how the notion of like happiness versus dissatisfaction versus paranoia figures into your head.
I'm trying to figure that out with my therapist now. I grew up in Maine, and later in life, now I'm very thankful to have grown up in Maine. I grew up in a small, pretty liberal society that everyone kind of did everything. Like everyone was small town, everyone was in theater, everyone that also played, varsity sports, and like was super, studious and all that stuff. So it was really like great community to grow up in, but I felt super trapped. There was something inside me from a young age that was like, there's so much more going on in the world. My mom was a super curious person, and I think I inherited a lot of that from her genetically and through her parenting. My mom was just a great explorer, and still to this day like loves learning and seeing more things, and I always wanted that. And there wasn't a lot of opportunity to leave Maine as I was a kid, and I think music was the thing that illuminated everything for me. I was super passionate about playing music from a really young age, and then as soon as I kind of developed my own musical stage, I was very obsessed with just like what I hadn't heard before. And I think that's what eventually brought me to dance music, is because I had this transformative experience like when I was 16, and I did an exchange program in Argentina, and I heard the beginning of David Guetta and like Daft Punk for the first time, and this artist Trent Muller, who I fell in love with, and I heard these sounds that were just like, I had never seen colors like that. That in a nutshell is like my pursuit of the itch that I'm always trying to scratch. I'm trying to hear something new, and it's quite torturous, to be honest, because once you've done something, you're like, yeah, okay, like that's happened, and how do you innovate? It's like innovator's dilemma. Like, how do I continue to create something that my fans really feel connected to, and that I feel connected to, and like really respects the core identity that is me and the music and this thing that I've built, that's also innovative, that feels like is still me, and gets me excited to go up and play new songs, and my fans feel like it's fresh. And I think it's a pretty like torturous pursuit that drives me crazy a lot of the time. And we have, I won't name names, but there are some artists in our genre and other genres that have just seemed to make the same song like again and again and again. And I think for a while we were kind of like, all right, we don't need to hear this person's new song because
heard it already.
Yeah, I heard it already. But we look at what that like looks like over like 10 to 15 years, and you're like, oh my God, they're the only person that does that sound. And all these fans are just amassing and telling their friends and all this thing. And like you look at like someone like the Grateful Dead, and you look like, what's that become? Like they're maybe the best people at making fans over time, and incredible musicians, but they've created this experience that's like replicable, that people can tell, that people can rely on and tell their friends about, and has great ethos. And I think that's really interesting to think about as we're like kind of, what does the rest of Chainsmokers look like for us?
How do you think about like a tech idea like product market fit for you going forward? Like obviously you've had it in the past, just like, I don't know, measured by streams or popularity or something.
Yeah.
But if you think about it prospectively, and you were to like redefine what success would mean, how much is it for the audience versus for yourselves? Like, it's such an interesting question.
A lot of artists would probably struggle with this question, us included. I'm trying to figure that out all of the time. And part of me wants to just get out of my own way and just be like, fuck it. Like, I just have to make stuff that, like, there have been a couple records, like we made this record called Don't Lie, that our fans didn't connect to and didn't connect commercially. It came out just, 6 months ago? Yeah. And when I hear that song, I'm like, fuck yeah, I did the goddamn thing on that. Like, from like a writing, production, like as like a pop like kid, I'm like, this, like Kim Petras, awesome artist, sounds amazing on it. The whole vibe of the record, I just hear it and I'm like very proud of it. But there's something about it that just like didn't connect. Was it the marketing? Was it just like that song from us? Was it that song in general, Maybe that didn't have the essence of Alex and I in it enough, Or maybe it didn't feel like we meant it enough, But for some reason our fans didn't connect to that song.
That other piece of the puzzle is what we're trying to figure out now. It's like, how do we show people we really care about this music without like looking like some Gen Z on TikTok doing stupid videos, like videos that like work for some people, but it isn't us. And I think like a lot of it comes down to like language and like how you present yourself. And I think like the same thing for like companies and product market fit. It's like, what is the story you're telling? Why should people care? How are you sharing it with the world? And if you don't like care about it, then why would anyone else? And I think that like the best
intentionality matters more than ever.
Yeah.
Like your fans want to know that like you love this thing that you created, you know, in a world of slop, you know, like how
do you show them that? Is it just the quality of the work?
I don't know. You know, I'm really confused about this part, especially in this day and age where I see artists that aren't us, that have a different vibe or are from a different generation, do it so effortlessly. I think like presenting stuff as art is always like super important. I'm really loving, one of my favorite bands is this band called Turnstile. They're a hardcore band from Baltimore. It just reminds me of so much stuff that I grew up on, and but feels fresh and repackaged, and like the videos are amazing, the rollout, and there's so much intentionality behind it that like I'm realizing a lot of the projects that I'm really gravitating to are just kind of encapsulating all of that stuff. I don't know that we've ever intentionally like gone after that. We've just kind of been like, we're making tunes, we're gonna do all the shows we can, and like that inherently became us.
This really interesting thing about you guys to me is not just work ethic. Like your work ethic, we could talk about that. It's obviously prodigious. It's incredible the amount of stuff that you guys do. But it's this combination of like the work ethic as a means to build relationships with more people. Like it seems like everyone I know has some experience of you guys. They've met you somehow. Like somehow you've met everyone. You've had a nice interaction with them. Like there's a high degree of accessibility that seems to come with the work ethic that allows for these relationships. How do you think about work ethic plus relationships as like a key part of what defines you guys?
First of all, you have to want to do that. We loved to throw parties, and we loved to choose the music, and we loved to curate the vibe, and like that was why we became DJs, pretty down the middle. That was always really inherently us. I mean, we love making music, we love starting businesses, we love helping other businesses. But I think like the first thing that we kind of went after was capitalizing on this desire to create a fun ass time for people. And I think that is what we've continued to do at all levels. And we're hyper curious and it's, I think, very gratifying for us to be able to pull people into our world. And personally, it makes me really happy when you can include someone that's not typically included in a lot of their either social dynamic or work setting or whatever. When they come to our show or to hang out with us backstage, if you can make 30 to 90 seconds and really like listen to someone and look in them in the eye and offer them a drink in your environment or anything there, that's the little like bits of magic that you get to pass around, and hopefully they keep passing on to somebody else. And I think that's kind of the just soul of what we do. And do that for 13 years, it feels like you've met everybody, or people feel like they've had a great connection, with you or with each other at your thing, and that's a nice. I think we like being those guys.
I feel like I was like I said earlier, not the most popular kid in high school, but not the worst either. And
not the worst.
Somewhere in the middle. But I think that's like my whole attitude was like I was just friends with everybody, you know what I mean? And just generally like nice person. Varsity basketball team I'd hung out with to like the art kids later, and it's like I enjoy, ironically was like school president, but I feel like that was like a summation of, and I never thought that was never like a goal. It was kind of like people were like,
everyone likes you.
Yeah, like you should obviously do this. Like everyone, would totally vote. You're friends with everybody, and I feel like that was like such an interesting experience, like in life where like there wasn't like we don't talk to that person because they're like this. Because it's like I always felt like that plenty of times I wasn't cool or whatever, and it meant so much to me when someone like came out of their way to like make you feel acknowledged or comfortable in something. And I felt like if you could like continue to challenge myself to like be that person in all sorts of different settings and scenarios. And it wasn't like with this long-term goal that's like, Billy Madison when he's like calls Steve Buscemi and he apologizes, and then Steve Buscemi saves him, later. And he's like, thank God I called that guy. It's not like that sort of thinking where you're like, one day this guy's gonna put money in my fund. You know what I mean? It's more like, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or an SDR, like a huge company or whatever. It's like, just come and be a part of the world, and like if you bring great energy, like that's super interesting and exciting to me. And I think we feed off of that experience that we give people, like Drew said. And we play Vegas hundreds and hundreds of times, and people are like, how are you still doing this? And it's like, because every weekend there's like a new group of people coming, experiencing this for the first time, and they're so excited. And you sometimes forget how lucky you are to be in that position. The kindness that people have showed us in the past, from like radio stations that supported us early on when they didn't need to. Life is so long, and I think if you, like Drew said, really like take a second to listen. I've read this I think Chuang Fan, I'm hoping pronouncing his name right, posted this interesting blog post from this wedding photographer who's been like shooting weddings for like 30 years or something. And it was like all these, like, it was like 21 insights that she's like noticed about like bride and grooms and different people that attend weddings and the personalities that they have. And it was like, some of them felt a bit over the top, but like a lot of them were like, that's a super interesting observation. And I think if you like study people and study relationships, you're like, that's kind of all it is. Like, we're all just interacting with each other. That's fundamentally what business is. It's fundamentally what relationships are. And so if you can like put yourself in a position where people enjoy being around you and feel, seen when you're with them, I think that's amazing. And it's something we definitely struggle with as you get busier too, because it's like, I'm taking calls in like August right now, and it kills my soul to be like, I would love to speak to you in September, you know what I mean? That's just, I guess it's just getting older and shit, yeah.
If I think about Chainsmokers Inc., like the enterprise around the art, what does it look like, and how has it evolved? And this is maybe like a good bridge question into talking about investing and businesses and stuff. But if you just think about your business first and foremost, how much are you thinking about it? How much is it intentional, looking a certain way versus just more of a residual thing that has evolved alongside your music?
It's evolving as we're trying to simplify it as much as possible. And I mean that in the ways of like, just like really looking at how we spend our time, how we enjoy spending our time, what we're getting the most out of, and kind of stripping away everything else. I think kind of when our career was on the rise for the first time, we were so curious and we wanted to do, for all the reasons we've told you about us in our past, whatever, wanted to try all of these different things, said yes to way too much. And I think that, through doing that, we found the things that resonate with our core, making the music that we make is still the number one. Our last two things will be venture and music, and we genuinely are in love with both of those things. And I think sometimes I regret having a situation where we have both, but if I had to pick one, I don't know which one I would pick. And I think just trying to build processes through both of those businesses that like we can do them in like, I don't want to say effortless ways, but like the ones that are most synced to who we inherently are, so that we're able to, everything we said about intentionality and, creating art that's really you, like how do we open that process up so we can do that the easiest? I hope that's how we're striving to evolve now, yeah.
And I think that like, that when we raise money for our fund, I get asked that question a lot. And, I always say that like Chainsmokers is the sun in our solar system, because it's like everything circles around that. And if it's a really strong sun, it shines more light and creates more abundance and opportunity across, Mantis and whatever, the tequila company and other things. Whereas like, I don't know if like a strong Mantis saves our music career, you know what I mean? But maybe.
Alternative events.
Yeah, but I also think like, what separated us, differentiated us early on, and kind of to Drew's point is what we're trying to turn back the hands of time now, is that like we did run Chainsmokers like a business. As much as we obviously care so deeply about the music and the creative aspect of it, but it was also like, this is a really unique opportunity that we want to make sure we're taking full advantage of, and whether that was like doing too many things, playing too many shows or whatever, really control the business. I mean, there is not a credit card statement that I have not gone through line by line still to this day, week by week. There's not, a production budget that I haven't seen for a single show. The way that we organized our team, it set us up for success in a lot of ways. I mean, COVID for some artists was like pretty devastating, whereas for us, we were like,
let's raise a fund.
Yeah, it was like great. And so I think, the problem with that though was that we became like the CEOs of Chainsmokers. And I think this is like relates to like probably a lot of like successful founders' journeys, is that like I was talking to, founder of a company who's crushing it right now. And he was like, all I do is HR. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's like, I don't build shit anymore. All I do is hire people and it fucking sucks. And I was like, kind of know what you're going through. You know what I mean? Like we're on so many calls about internal politics and this. And like, I think we're actually like making really solid strides to fix that, to go back to being the Chainsmokers instead of the CEOs of the Chainsmokers.
There's so many parallels between investing and working with these companies and our own business, and it's really fun to have our own business.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to be the therapist for somebody else and have an x-ray into like what they could be doing better, how to get out of their own way. And then when it's you, it's like, this is how it's always done it. I came up with this, and you have all this shit in the way. And so it's been a great mirror investing in these other businesses and then kind of looking at our own and being like, how are we hitting these roadblocks or bottlenecks in our own situation? But I mean, that key one being like, be the founder or be like the CTO or whatever you're like best at. Like you don't have to be the CEO of your business, hire someone that's great at that, that's going to deal with that. If you're the best product person, you're the best visionary at the company, don't be the CEO.
Can you tell the Mantis origin story? So like what was the first conversation you had about it? What were you trying to do with it? Why did you do it in the first place?
Before Mantis, creating a venture tech fund felt like the most, we've done a plethora of businesses. We're very avid investors, both privately and publicly. The tech world, in just public markets, in real estate. And I think, at the time of our rise to, I guess, like cultural zeitgeist time, which was probably 2016 to 2015 to probably 2018, we met a lot of the class of founders that was like Drew Houston from Dropbox, Brian Chesky did Airbnb, Michael Seibel, who was at YC at the time. And these guys were like really amazing and opened our eyes to what private tech investing looked like. We didn't really know what venture capital was at the time. And we saw, through their eyes, like, a lot of them it was simple. It was like, why are you guys could invest in like all of these brands based on like who you are. People want cool people on the cap table. And it started with something as simple as that idea. And then as we got to befriend these people and get an insight into how they ran their businesses, we realized we kind of had more in common with them than we did with most other musicians. We like growth hacked our first promotional platform, crowdsourced our first tour. We've always been doing like the most to kind of like try and get our music out there. And when we work with a lot of other artists, we found the majority of them were like pretty disorganized, and we're just kind of like in pursuit in a different way than we were. And I think there was some kind of sense of familiarity and comfort and like-mindedness that we found with tech founders that like pulled us deeper into the space. So we did a bunch of private investing.
Just yourselves, just
ourselves, deal by deal, whatever, conceptualized the idea to start the fund. And then like Alex said, when, COVID happened, we were kind of putting it together in 2019 before COVID happened. But I don't know what would have happened if COVID didn't happen, because we were also prioritizing writing an album at that time, and all of a sudden we had time to raise a fund on Zoom and write an album in the studio. So
naturally, entertainer athletes have these platforms that people are drawn to for different reasons. And I think like when it relates to investing, you're seeing a lot of CPG, social creator economy type stuff. And initially for us, that was like cool. Like I remember my business manager Josh was like, basically you invest and you just like hopefully make a bunch of passive income. Oh, that's it. So how sick is that? You know what I mean? And I was like, he also prefaces like, you probably will lose your money, but like you could.
Which we did a lot of times.
We were really drawn to that like entrepreneurial spirit. Like we're go-getters. Like we worked 24/7. Like if there's something that we could do now, we're gonna do it now, not 5 days from now. And I think like as we began to connect with these founders, and I remember getting like your first quarterly updates, and I remember responding to one, and I was like, I could help you with that. And they were like, nobody responds to these. And I was like, what? You know what I mean? And then it was like these little ways that we were able to like make a real difference in these companies. And then to Drew's point, like the people like Brian Chesky and Steve Huffman and the Kahn brothers were like, why are you investing in fucking water companies? Like, our company.
Our water company is doing quite well.
Yeah. There's a few good ones. And we've made, some good decisions, but they were like, there's a whole world of opportunity investing out there into like really exciting companies. And I remember like doing the Uber series like F. And I thought I was like in early. And I think I've made like $6,000 on this investment. But like at the time, like I was like, this is the coolest company ever. Like it's actually changed my life and my friends' lives. And like, I want to find more stuff like this versus like, another beverage company or something like that. Although like we were very lucky with Poppy, and Poppy, like to its credit, like reinvented what the soda category looked like and will probably look like in the future. And so like that was a really nice blend of technology and forward thinking and messaging, and then as it relates to marketing and distribution. Whereas I think a lot of like CPG is just distribution and kind of marketing.
In tech investing, you just get a front seat view of the future. It's the most stimulating show you could watch, and you get to, it favors the optimistic, which like we're artists, we like to dream about things that don't exist yet and building a world. And I think like we didn't know it would be a lot of cybersecurity platforms, but we got to secure all those things. But
it kind of reminds me of like being in like your assembly in like middle school, high school, where like every now and again they would bring in like a professional, and they would like speak about their career to the audience for like an hour, and you'd be like, that guy actually did this shit. This is like really interesting and exciting to me to learn from, versus like, no offense to like a teacher, that's just like kind of like, here's my, perspective on something that happened or a career. And it's like, in venture, you get to sit down for half an hour, hopefully many, many times with like a founder that's like, I've studied this space, I've lived and breathed this, business, and I'm gonna tell you everything about it right now. And that's like, for someone like me, that's like the coolest thing to spend 5 or 6 hours a day learning from an, experienced person in a new technologically exciting area. But like, obviously the evolution of Mantis has like changed. I don't want to say changed dramatically, it just evolved a lot. I mean, I remember like on our first like partner call, they were like, so how much are we gonna raise? And someone was like, 100 million? And I was like, is that a lot? Like, kind of feels like a lot, I don't
turned out to be a lot.
I don't know, I have no fucking clue, like I just want to start. And I think like a big part of anything is just start doing it. That to me is like probably one of the things that sets us apart and makes our partnership so unique, is that like we push each other into these areas that you're like, maybe on your own you'd be like, I don't know where to begin, so I'm not going to begin, and that's the cold start problem. Obviously, is the hardest part of any process, but I think with us, we're very like comfortable putting ourselves in those uncomfortable situations, but also like because of how we interact with people and the relationships we've had, we're just like listeners, and we spent the better part of those 3 years doing 10 hours of calls a day with like any investor or founder that would speak to us, and just like asking questions and like learning through their experiences, the mistakes they made or the things we should think about, and a lot of it began to contradict each other by the end of it, but like there was definitely some patterns and things there. And like, I think through those conversations, we were like, wait a minute, like this does feel like an extension of like what being a good investor means is an extension of what made us good in Chainsmokers. And it gave me, a lot of confidence that like we were right to get into this space. But I think fighting the, preconceived conceptions, and rightfully so, a lot of them, about like being a celebrity investors, and I've told this before, but it's like, on fund announce day, it wasn't like a positive vibe, like people weren't like, finally, what I mean? Like Chainsmokers are, it was like
I'm so happy
the opposite. People were not stoked about it at all. To me, we saw that as like, as much as it was like a hill we were gonna have to climb, the bar was clearly low. So it was like, maybe we don't have to do that much to be that much better. But it was like also like a market opportunity. It was like, wait a minute, like people think we're gonna be fucking useless, and that like this is based on a lot of other people that have come before us and their experience with them. If we do this right, like it's a lot of white space for us to be unique and different, and kind of that's the kind of product market fit that we found in our music early on, and that I think like gave us the confidence to start Mantis and take it, really seriously.
What are the things that most map over from what has worked for building Chainsmokers into what you're feeling early on is working as investors?
Being comfortable losing is a weird one. Like no one wants to lose, but I think you have to it's a power law game, music. Like you build a career off of like a couple of huge songs, hopefully. And then there's lots of great music, but only very few artists will like a Drake, will just constantly deliver smash songs for 10, 15 years. Or Bruno Mars is probably the most notable one from a percentage basis. But like you have to learn from each song and iterate and grow and be comfortable with that. And it's like, venture is very much the same thing. You're gonna hopefully back a couple of extraordinary companies, but most of your companies won't go on to be super successful. And you can't like lose sight of that, like think you're a terrible investor. Like each of those opportunities kind of like built or like paved the way for what hopefully more future success comes.
I've been thinking a lot recently about how the relationship between an artist and a record label is basically the same as a founder and their investor. And I think about how we are now in the other seat and we are now on the label side, investing in these companies. I think about, we've been really fortunate to work with, we've been at Columbia Disruptor for 9 years. And they've done an incredible job for us. But you see all the ailments of like, people like having a bad relationship with their label. And I think a lot of times we try to think about okay, cool, now we're on the label side, we are an investor. What can we do to support these founders? And that's become a brand promise for our fund, is like, we are like we want to be the utility player. Because every company is different, every founder is different, everyone's needs are different. How can we help you? And I think that's the same for every single artist with their label, where there's a lot of labels that want to be helpful, but they just don't know how. And all you can really do when you're in that position is like get in the game and be like, what can I do? Like this, and be straight up. This is my area of expertise. I don't know that person, but I know a guy who does. I'm going to try to make an email intro for you. Like, we don't hire that type of like employee, but I'm gonna hit up these 3 recruiters, just like putting in the effort and showing these people that you support them. And to Alex's point, like, things that like felt like tasks that we saw our founders need from us that felt so far out of our grasp were actually much more attainable. You realize that like there was a level of like high touch responsiveness that like us, primarily Alex. I mean, we don't have to go into the history of like how we built the Chainsmokers and how instrumental Alex's thoroughness in being in touch with people has been, to our success. But I mean, just kind of being the partner that like we see every artist wishing they had at a label.
I have a collaboration question. I told each of my kids this morning on the drive to school that they could come up with one question for you guys. Yeah. My daughter's question was about the song Jungle with Alok, which is her favorite, I guess. Yeah. And she wanted to know how one of those works, which in this world is so common. Like you see multiple DJs, collaboration, etc. Yeah. Like literally how 2 people that independently can do the thing come together to work on a shared thing.
I mean, it's always different, and we've done tons of collabs. We worked with tons of writers, tons of producers. We're kind of always collaborating with people, and it's always, I mean, like a session, in our opinion, your job is to get into the room with this person that hopefully you have mutual respect for each other's music. You see some kind of like vision that your sounds could work together, or you have some like great idea around what this song could be together, whatever. There's some basis for you guys doing a session together, hopefully. Your job as like a great songwriter, producer, just artist is like, how do we get on the same page as quickly as possible? Which is kind of a fascinating thing about songwriting, that, is like, you get in the room with someone and it's like, what are you, and sometimes I try to preempt this. Like I try to figure out where this person is at before we get together. I think Alex and I, just being the type of people we are, like we don't have a lot of time. And we want to make the most out of every session. So like, having 3 like beat like starts of an idea, which could just be like a small piece of music or like chords that feel a certain type of way. or a vocal that's really great, but like the drop or the dance part's like not great, and like maybe that would be great if that person came and did the drop. And this goes both ways. Typically, we're pretty specific about the lyrics, and like we like to write them. And Jungle actually is one of the only songs recently that we did not write. I don't think I wrote anything on the top line of that song, which is like, that's maybe like 5% of Chainsmokers songs. But Alok brought that song to us, and we like, let's make this like a big sounding donk 140 BPM record, which also doesn't sound like is an hardcore sound. It's like an opportunity for us to go and make something that like, doesn't fit in the typical Chainsmokers bucket. So
yeah, I feel like we got that top line. It was like fairly stripped back and from him, and we were like, this is cool. But because you don't write, you're kind of just like, you listen to it and you're like, I like it. You know what I mean? But you're like, but the fact that we didn't write it kind of like adds this level of friction to it. But like you kind of put it to the side, because like music is, like very subjective in terms of like how you're feeling in that moment, that day. Are you frustrated? Are you in a rush? And I think we like played it a couple of times for like different friends of ours, and everyone was like, this is sick. And you're like, I know. You know what I mean? And you're kind of like, I know. And we love him, and obviously he's a massive artist, especially in like Brazil, which is like a really important, mark to us. And like you look at these things being like, well, this is a guy we get along great with, has a tremendous amount of, like a huge fan base. And
this will be fun.
Yeah, like what is there to lose here, really? Like we do like this top line, if we can produce it in a way that feels interesting and connects back to us. I think that's where we've in the past, and the few times we've done it, like, like people are like, I love this song, and you're like, what does it mean to you? And you're like, it's not that it sucks. And you're like, it doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? Like we didn't write this. You know what I mean? And that's why I think we're really not drawn to that type of thing, because we really want to be able to like tell people why this song's important, has meaning and purpose, and it does have meaning and purpose to someone. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was like a fun one to make, and then getting to like finally get to play it. I think we played it at Il Sonique for the first time. Yeah. And he has like a whole vibe, like I'm sure if you've seen him online, like looks like he's living in 2080 stylistically, and he's done some incredibly big shows, and he's really, I think he's like one of those, other than Anita, like the most.
Yeah, he's huge.
Brazil. And
I just went to Carnival with him. It was a blast in Bahia. It was crazy. He played for 2 million people on a bus that drives through the street for 5 hours.
That's what like is exciting about collaboration, I think, in general, is like having the opportunity.
A taste of other parts of the world. Yeah.
See how other people approach their art, like even the teams from a promotional standpoint, like how are you selling this record, or what tricks do you have up your sleeves, or who are the directors that you like to work with for music videos? Tonally, like, it's exciting. Like Zerb, the song Addicted, like, that was his second big song. And, like you felt like you were a small chapter and will probably be a really long, successful career for him. But it was like, we're a big feature of that. The same way that Coldplay is for us, or Halsey is for us, and we are for them. And I think that's like, a really interesting way to kind of like build a career, and also give you fresh perspective about how you're approaching, your process and your music. Because it's like, similarly, you sit down and you're like, man, everything must be great for you. And it's like, you sit down with an artist, like, dude, I'm stressed the fuck out. Like, I'm upset about this. And you're like,
well, it looks amazing.
Yeah. Oh, so we're all kind of like not happy, really, or stressed about stuff. And it's nice to see that. You know what I mean? I think that's probably why founders, like, I feel like in venture, there's that kind of trope or a motif that's just like founders love founders. And most venture capitalists, or they love venture capitalists that were founders of some sort, because you understand the process and struggle a bit more than someone who hasn't gone through that journey.
On that specific point, you mentioned early, like kind of what it takes to win early on, and growth hacking your way on the promo thing, or the early things that drove some of the initial success. What were those things? And I'm sure this is something you're looking for in people and in companies, like the ability to sort of scrap their way from nothing to something and then build on that.
Yeah.
What were those things that you were referring to a couple times?
I think we're just really scrappy. I mean, I think like we obviously put ourselves in like I quit my day job. He moved down from Maine and lived on his ex-girlfriend's couch which is probably really uncomfortable. And we're just like, this is it. Like, we have to put all of our eggs in this basket, and, you know, that will hopefully, you know, push us to work that little, you know, like extra few hours every day and stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that. Like, I was like $150,000 in debt. He like left his like, you know, you had a
comfortable job. Yeah. And my boss was like, "You're what?" He was like,
"Don't do this.
You can come back if
when this doesn't work out."
You know, which I appreciated, but didn't want to go back. But I think that was a big part of it. I think for us, we spent a lot of, you know, like time trying different things. You know, I think like that iterative process of being, like, but also being like really honest about it. Like, I remember, you know, making some song that like sounded very much like an Avicii kind of like tonally song, and then and we were like, this is fire, but then we were like, is it though? Because it's just like Avicii, but not Avicii.
The beginning of our career, we were like trying to emulate people like that, and like Zed and Avicii and Skrillex and Calvin Harris and David Guetta and Swedish House Mafia. There was so much exciting things happening in dance music, but I was a novice producer. You were just getting into it. We had DJ gigs around the city, and we grew up on indie music, and so we would go on this website called Hype Machine. I don't know if you ever were aware of that. Yeah. It's like the first viral chart of the internet, and it was all music that wasn't kind of being officially released. It was like tons of dance remixes. Remixes in general were like a new concept. So we go on Hype Machine, and we would look at, you know, the top 50 tracks, and they were all tracks that we loved. They didn't have a presence in dance music. A lot of like the DJs we just mentioned were remixing Rihanna, Lady Gaga, whatever was like on the pop radio at that time. And we were like, well, we love indie music, and we grew up on indie music and hardcore music and all this stuff that doesn't really have a presence in the dance world. These songs are already trending. Why don't we? So what Alex, you know, would go into, so basically find contact information for every artist that was on this chart and send them a hilarious personalized email. We would get a response, and, you know, in the beginning we were just kind of like taking what we could get. No one really would respond to us. He'd give me the stems, I would do this remix, and then he would go into the back end of Hype Machine. He would find every writer that wrote for every blog that Hype Machine scraped music from, and he would send them a hilarious personalized email. And what we realized is all of these kids were just college kids that wanted to be closer to music, and here, you know, they're getting these blanket press releases that are just generic, no one reads them, whatever, coming from a label, not even like attached to a personal email, versus like Alex being the guy who made the song, sending you the song. It's a song that you're already posting about, so it's relevant. It's a dance remix, which is the most trendy new sound at the time. So he gave people a lot of reason to, and then he wrote this really fucking funny email that like everyone related to, and within 3 emails they felt like they had a personal connection with us, which they did. And I think within the first year of our career, you know, we went from 0 to 30 number ones on Hype Machine. That took us out of, you know, DJing at Pink Elephant and all great times, 2012 club scene in New York. But, you know, then we're doing colleges here and there, and that kind of was our first step. And eventually, like, that process of like building a distribution kind of channel with all of these blogs transferred into, then we started putting out original music, and we had to do it with radio. You know, you do a show in San Francisco, okay, well, you got to drive to San Jose that morning and do any DJ that wants to talk to you from every station. You go and like form a relationship with them, and then, you know, you go to Oakland and you do that there, and then you go to San Francisco and do San Francisco at night, and then you go do your shows, and the next day you fly to Chicago and you do the same type of thing. And you get a couple extra spins for those things, and like you got everyone kind of like rooting for you. And like I think that's the kind of grit that like we want to see with our founders, is like, do you have the tenacity?
How bad do you want it?
How bad do you want this? Like, sometimes like this stuff, people think you just put a hit song out and it becomes a hit, but like, you know, I think all the things we talked to you about today are all those little pieces that you don't see people doing, or once it's successful and you try to like trace back to how it started, you're like, oh, well, they just put it out and the whole thing worked. And it's like, no, you can't look at this shit retroactively. You have to be like, you know, there's a grind story behind everybody, you know. People grind to product market fit, you know. It's like, sometimes they just stumble on it and they make it and it goes and it works forever, but usually, like, you know, I'm sure if you talk to any like long-lasting successful CEO, like, or founder, there's been moments where like they're like, fuck, like my strategy is not working anymore, and I have to go back to like eating shit, making phone calls, like begging people, like finessing relationships to like get myself through the next hurdle.
It seems to me like so much of the ability to do that grind requires that you love some core element of the thing you're doing. I mean, you've talked about it with music all day today. Like, if a song doesn't work, it's fine. You still love making music, you're gonna make another one. How much does that matter to you when you're talking to a founder? Like how much, maybe the broader way of asking the question is, what are the things in the first conversation with the founder that that are non-negotiables for you that you like have to see to be interested?
I mean, I feel like, Alex Pall at Redpoint said this to me in like a really simple way, which is just like invest in people that are going to do this idea no matter what. You know what I mean? Even if it like fails, they're going to start it again with from a different angle. Then the question becomes, you know, is this a like step function better, or is this like something that can potentially reshape the way that an economy or business or software or platform or service is used? You know, and I think like Union Square Ventures does a really good job of how they think about like investing at the edge of ideas, and then those ideas hopefully become more central. And then the TAM question answers itself, because if you figure that out, it's going to be humongous. And so I think like that obsession is really important to us. And even like going back to the, you know, Drew's anecdote just now, like we weren't just like dance music's big. We were like obsessed with dance music. I mean, I was downloading off blogs before we even were, I was, you know, learning to produce with Drew, hundreds of songs a day, you know, that I would just like put in a folder because I just loved discovering new music. And I also threw parties everywhere here in New York City for like 6, 7, 8 years. So I also understood like how to fill a room. I understood like as a club owner, you don't give a shit about what the DJ's playing. You just want your club to be filled, making money. And so we understood like the business side of like how to be successful as the Chainsmokers within a venue, you know, and what was important to them. And so we like really had all of these like pieces, like understanding the same way that kind of it's sometimes advantageous to invest in a founder like is a specialist from that field. Like, hey, I was working at Salesforce. This is a problem that I always had, and now I'm starting that company. And I think it's a problem that a lot of other people have. And I've experienced it firsthand, and I know the solution that I need to build. Like that, I think that really resonates with me versus like the opportunistic, like AI's hot right now, I'm just gonna build an AI company, you know what I mean? Or something like that. And I think like you might have short-term success, but as anyone who's been successful tells you, it's a very long road of getting kicked in the nuts a lot. And you kind of have to just like love it so much that like you almost enjoy the misery of those moments and know that it's just like part of the process ultimately. And I'm like going through this with a company of ours right now that's doing a really terrific job. They just signed their first big enterprise customer. They've spent like the last 4 months you know, building out the integration. And I really like admire how this is a guy that would like 100%, he's going to do, you know, bring BYOs, bring your own cloud to like the forefront. Like this is his life's mission. I think he's built like a really compelling platform. He has a really compelling enterprise customer, but he's spent like him and his team have been like, what do you need? What is not working? How do we make this perfect? You know, like we really want to learn through this experience with you as our first enterprise, you know, user, how to make this successful versus being like, who else wants this? You know what I mean? And he's really being intentional the same way with us, where it wasn't like, let's just keep doing a million remixes. Like we would listen to these songs and be like, does this meet the requirements of what we love and think is a great indie song that should get remixed? Or is this, because it wasn't like always like, this is the number one. Sometimes it was like the 15th song, but we were like, this song is sick and we need to remix this song. And I think like that intentionality is super important.
You really want to find someone that like has that experience, is like knows exactly what they need to solve for, but you really have to be careful to make sure that like that person, like what did they do before they worked at this company? You know, where do they come from? Do they have a self-starter mentality? Like what have they done? Did they just go and work here for a long time, like a while? What did you do before this that makes me believe that you're going to be able to like fuck shit up when it gets hard? And like keep rethinking things, keep having the tenacity that gets you through the hurdles that we see.
What is most different between how you're investing today versus when you started Mantis? Like what's evolved the most in your style, your preferences, the process, the team? Like
on the like practice of investing, like from ownership and stage and like the discipline that goes into like making the cents make dollars, you know? And I think that's a really important piece that like comes with experience, the same way that we've had been lucky to have conversations with Peter Fenton and Bill Gurley and Alfred Lin and prolific investors, and there was like certain commonalities. We were just like, you're going to think this. It's not the truth, but you're going to do it anyways, and then you'll be where I am right now.
So true, yeah.
And they're totally right. Yeah, if we're lucky. But I think like the funny thing is like, if anything, I feel like I've reverted back to where I think we're the strongest investor. Like our goal at Mantis is to be like the sixth man on every championship team. Like I want to work with the best investors who are investing in the best founders, and I want to absorb the things that both those parties are doing to like understand how to make better decisions and build a better firm. And that doesn't mean we're not contrarian thinkers, and we're certainly not followers, but like information is so readily available everywhere right now, where it's like you do see the best companies generally gravitating towards a specific group of investors that have been winning for a long time now. Or at least,
or identifying the new ones that are,
or specific individuals within those funds, more so than the brand of the fund itself. And for us, like you kind of just know when there's like a really interesting, exciting founder. Like it's just like there's like an hysteria around them in a lot of ways. And I think there's like that part of investing, which I kind of like find myself reverting back to. I think some people might call it like a signal investor, but at the same time, I think it's just like this pattern where it's like the space, the founder, the team, the investors, the perspective of where they came from before and the problem they're solving now. And you're just like, I don't know if they're going to be successful, but this has all of the ingredients of a company we should be investing into. And then there's the founders where you're like, this is I'm going out in the woods on my own a little bit here. I don't think this idea is like so radically weird that like no one else is going to be interested in this, but like there's going to be a lot more alchemy than science initially. And those ones are kind of like the company I just brought up, Nuon, before. It's like where I think is really exciting as an investor, because you're like, we're testing like a hypothesis right now, but where we think the future is going. And this guy has the right pedigree. We have some solid people around the cap table with us, but the momentum to get this ball moving is going to be a lot harder than the other company, which is just like, hey, if Sequoia invested, someone is going to do that A. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's like just for no reason, and I think that's what you have to learn through experience is like, how do you see through all the noise and bullshit of like hype versus reality versus, ZERP periods. And, it's like, we've really seen a lot in the last 6 years, and it really has like changed my perspective on when you want to throw yourself into something and when something's not real in venture. Because I think like there's so many stages of like, oh my God, we got our company marked up to Series A, like we must be really good. And it's like, there's so much further for this company, like before you see any liquidity or success. And so like, it's interesting how you don't want to get kind of caught up in that part of the puzzle where you're like, well, I'm creating, like my IRR looks pretty solid right now. And it's like, what's your DPI? That's really the question, you need to be asking yourselves. And I think like we're all kind of chasing that game of like, who is our customer? Is it the founders or is it our LPs? And the answer is both, obviously, but like you walk this tightrope where you're, trying to kind of decide where you think you should be putting the most, time in. Because like you have found a, company, like for us, when we started, we were writing 25, 50K checks into companies. That was all we could get, and it was about proving ourselves and building a reputation. A lot of those companies are doing really well because like, it was like squeezing into a really important hot round with great investors and great founders. And now that we're looking for bigger allocation, we're still having success, but it's a different conversation now where you can't just be like, yeah, we're gonna put,
Nice to have you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been really interesting, like going with, and also like we have a team of people now that are extraordinary, and everyone has their own identity and perspective on how they want to invest and evaluate things. And I feel like my job has always been to kind of like try to reel them in, kind of like how we're trying to treat the Chainsmokers now, which is like dumbing it down, keeping it, more simple than confusing, because it's so hard to get kind of wrapped up in the minutia of everything. And I've talked myself out of really good deals for that reason.
It reminds me of my son's question, himself an aspiring music maker.
Great.
I thought it was a really interesting question in the car this morning, which was, how do they know what is the next skill that they need to improve?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
This is definitely your kid.
Yeah, exactly, right? Your dad proud. I thought that was so interesting because there's so many, I'm sure there's 15 things you could go get better at any given point in time. And he was curious, like, that's where he is too. He's trying to figure out, he's 11. He's trying to figure out like what he's good at and what he needs to get better at. And so that's what he wanted to know.
Well, you can tell him I'm going to be thinking about that for the rest of the week. Right now, I'm trying to think about back to the question of like dumbing things down. It's like, how do we always feel like we're learning new stuff and there's new practices. I mean, like making music is a never-ending ladder. My drum teacher told me that when I was like 9 years old, and it's the most true thing I've learned like about in my musical journey. I think now at this point, we're always learning new things, but like with the abundance of things that we have learned, how do they not get in the way of our success? Because there is something beautiful about a young artist that, has their whole life to make their first album. There's a level of like, they're just a little bit naive, and like because of that, they're not overthinking shit, and they're just doing like, I'm part of this thing, and like when I make records that sound like this, it feels like me, and it makes me feel some type of way, and like when I hear it, I like that should be the visual, and like, oh, this guy's really cool, like this artist is really cool, maybe they'll do my cover art, like just really like that's what. We're just making music at the end.
It's like heart and soul over mind. Or
yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to I think we're both trying to reconnect with that as much as possible. I mean, that's like the innovator's dilemma too. Once you've reached this point and you're like, which way do I go? Do I keep trying to ride the wave of this thing that's kind of moved past me, but I can kind of hang on to it, or do you just be steadfast in the thing that is inherently you? And there's not really a right answer. There's a bunch of success stories for either side, but I mean, me personally, I'm trying to not let the lessons that I've learned
get in the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
The skills are weird. I mean, I feel like I was thinking while Drew was talking about that, and in venture, I was Googling words like TAM on my first month of college. I was like, I don't know.
We can say that now.
What are these fucking acronyms? Everyone's obsessed with
the
acronyms
TAM
in here.
A big TAM's good, right?
Yeah. And I'm just get me wrong. And I feel like I'm constantly asking stupid questions. And honestly, I really am grateful to a lot of the people we've had a chance to get to work with and interact with, because I think we've approached this space with a lot of respect, and everyone's, I think, hopefully acknowledges that now. And so it's there is no dumb questions. It's ask the questions. I'm always explain this to me like a golden retriever. You know what I mean? It's kind of something I say a lot. But it's funny when I'm as we've gone deeper into space, and obviously engineering is a huge part of any tech platform, and I was I kind of want to try to learn how to code a little bit, because I want to have at least a semblance of not just respect, but understanding of when I'm discussing these things, the different processes and stuff. And then, and then now vibe coding and cursor and things like that exist. And you're okay, so I don't need to learn coding anymore, but now it's back to taste, which I feel like I'm pretty good at, but it's an interesting process. And even in music, I played guitar growing up, but that was not much, that didn't carry on very long. And I remember a few years into our career, and I was dude, what if I have a kid one day and my kid's play closer for me? And I'm oh, I can't. You know what I mean? And I was that's so lame. So I was I'm gonna learn piano. So I took 2-hour lessons of piano 5 days a week and I still do this to this day now. But it was the purpose was original, to be I can't claim to be a musician if I'm not, I can't play our music. That's ridiculous. You know what I mean? And so I figured that, but in the process of practicing learning, it opened up a whole understanding of how to communicate my ideas to Drew or whatever as we're discussing music. And it really enabled me to be a much more critical, thoughtful musician in general. And so it's funny, those skills, but I totally agree with Drew, because though at the end of the day, where there is an ignorance is bliss sort of thing to a lot of this, where it's you can talk yourself out of any situation, and I think part of the investor's role is to be how many miracles am I comfortable with in order for me to back this? Is 5 miracles too much, or is it 2 or 1, you know, for things to go right. And you kind of have to like look at it through that lens and imagine that world. And I think like, I'm probably a little bit more like this in terms of my angel portfolio stuff, where I'm just like, fuck it, let's do it. Like we invested in this company, Radiant Nuclear, and you know, I remember talking to them over there in the first call, and it was like,
we can't do this.
Yeah.
And then we were like, but fuck it.
Yeah. And we're like, but if they do this and we didn't do it, I'm gonna be really pissed off. And a lot of it's like that sort of stuff, even though it sounds really stupid. I mean,
outside the fun.
Yeah,
Inside the fun, we have a process, I swear.
But he's like, you know, Doug is like, you know, got as good as pedigree and Bob as anyone to like tackle this problem. It was just like the timelines were like, and then in 7 years we'll be able to test the first one. And you're like, 7 years, we'll test it, you know? And you're like, all right, let's do it, you know what I mean? And now they're absolutely crushing it. And it, you know, and it's obviously like, Monday morning quarterbacking it. But it was like funny when you look at those things and you're just like, we could have like called our friends Blake and Chad and had deep conversations with our friends that have experience in this space, and they all would have probably been like, don't fucking do this.
Yeah.
What I was saying the other day, like, I don't know if we would have invested in Poppy again, you know, because we try not to stay away from CPG, but like, you know, that was like a 30x, you know, and it's just, but again, completely like YOLO. There is, again, some level of like naivety that you're just like, you gotta have faith. It's gotta, venture favors optimism, and, you know, I hope we would have identified that like Poppy had 2 incredible founders, but like maybe not. Maybe it was just like, another soda.
I was talking to Alex once about some company in the portfolio, and it wasn't like over Zoom or something, it was live, and he started rattling off the KPIs of the company. And I was like, wait, you know the company's KPIs? And then he was able to do that for like a bizarre amount of the companies. Yeah. And I asked him about it, and he said like, yeah, no, I know like all the numbers for all the companies, which is surprising. Back to your point about like when you announced a venture fund, everyone's like, oh, these like jagoffs have a venture fund now.
Yeah, and we're like, we gotta know all the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. But it's an amazing way that you've bridged the 2 worlds, and obviously it's early days. Like you said, you probably do both these things forever. It's such an amazing history for me to hear. I've loved doing it. When I do these, I ask the same traditional closing question of everyone. I get to do it twice today. What is the kindest thing that anyone's ever done for each of you?
It's so funny. I first of all obviously know that this is your final question, and I thought about this on my red-eye flight here for like so long, and like I was like, nobody's done any kind shit for me. That's the conclusion. I was like, I don't think I want to like single out anyone that significantly.
I love how you're gonna say this with caveat, like, I did think about this for 10 hours today.
Truth is, people aren't that kind to me. Like, at least like in the ways that I've heard other people like think through these things. I mean, obviously I have extraordinary friends and people in my life, but I guess if I had to like think of like, I was trying to think of like a clever way to answer this, because like, funny enough, I think it's like it was an unkind thing that she delivered. I had this homeroom advisor in 6th grade named Mrs. Park, who was like, I think she liked me, but I think she like also understood that I was like at this really interesting crossroads in my life. My dad had just passed away. I was like, you know, super, 12 years old, super young, impressionable age as a young boy. And, you know, I had a lot of friends, but I was also not like a banging student by any stretch. And she was just like very, clearly, I mean, she was like, this is like the most important moment in your life, and you will like probably not even recognize it till it's either, till it's too late, either in a positive or good way. But she's like, you are like fully at a crossroads right now, where like one path will lead you down, a road of success, where you'll use this, experience and the pain and everything that comes with it to like motivate you through life in a really positive way, or you will just become a total fuck up, and everything will be derailed, and you'll go on to accomplish nothing. And obviously, as a 6-year-old, you're like, what? You know what I mean? You're like, lady, it's like 8:15 in the morning. Like, like I'm going through some shit. But like, it actually did really stick with me in a lot of ways. Like from that moment forward, as I like thought about the different decisions I made in my life, whether inconsequential or consequential, was like kind of had this thing in the back of my mind, which is like, which path is this kind of leading me towards, and really like motivated me to like get my shit together and become like a great not like a good human and a really good student, and push myself. So ironically, like I think it's funny when someone can offer you advice like that, and I think maybe too often in today's day and age, people are offering advice like this all the time. People just don't listen anymore. You kind of like acknowledge it, but you don't really like think about fundamentally what it means. And this is like she was probably like in her mid 60s, and this woman's obviously, advised and taught whatever homeroom to hundreds and hundreds of kids, and probably I'm not even probably the first kid she's had this experience with. And it's like, and I'm so grateful that she said that.
Did you feel like when your dad passed away at a young age, like it snapped you awake in some way?
It was really tough. I mean, my parents, I love my mom. She's still around. She's an amazing woman. And, I had a really tough upbringing. They fought relentlessly. Like I'm talking, like insane fights. That's probably why I painted so much, because I just didn't want to leave my room and have to interact and get in the mix of all of that. And my dad passed away in the middle of the divorce. So it was like a really dark period. But like, kind of to the point of what I just said, and it was like I had a lot of friends that came to my side and supported me then. And more than anything, I think it's like as you get older, you kind of like distort memories. And now when I look back on things, I had this like completely different perspective now than I did when I was a 13-year-old about like who my dad was and how he treated my mom and how she treated him and how my relationship was with him or him with my sister. And so I think like after that moment, it was just kind of like, I have my family, but I'm really on my own to be my own man. And it's a weird experience not having grown up at all with anyone to be like, Dad, look at this, or like, am I doing this right? Or the dad that's like, hey, let me help you out, with this or do that. And so it's kind of like, been probably one of the strangely better things that has ever happened to me, but also like, I've never, seen a functional relationship in my life, which is probably why I'm still single.
What's your answer for the kindest thing?
The one that's coming up for me is my mom buying me a drum kit when I was 5 years old. Do you know what it's like to buy a drum kit for a 5-year-old kid in a 130-year-old farmhouse in Maine? You're listening to me trying to learn, listening to just smash drums, which I played all the way until I went to college, and my mom would sit in the kitchen doing grading papers and doing stuff that she had to do for work or making dinner, just like listening to it and like loved it. And kind of like watched my whole musical journey and always supported it. But yeah, crazy move for a parent. Yeah, just tortured herself. But she really loved it, and she's always been a very, I've always been fascinated with business and with music. And when I wanted to go to college for business, she really discouraged me from choosing a path that didn't include music in some way, and it ended up that way. So thanks, Mom.
Well, your guys' story is one of my favorites at this intersection of two of my favorite things, music and business. And I'm so excited by the next chapter of what it might become and what it might look like, and can't wait to watch. Thanks for doing this with me.
Hell yeah, this is an honor.
Thanks for having us, yeah.